Hello, everybody, and welcome back.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Here we are in February, and myself and Merv decided we should dust off the old microphones, Graham, shouldn't we?
Yeah. We enjoy doing it, so let's get back.
We do. And
we'll be back at least once a month.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. A cadence that suits our busy man lifestyle as we're busy men. But as always around this time of year, we reach out to the voice of the voiceless. A man,
our most popular guest ever.
A man who really and truthfully needs no introduction. So I won't really bother other than to say the wonderful and brilliant Philip O'Connor has joined us all the way from the Italian-Austrian border.
Indeed, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm absolutely disgusted with you two for making me follow the Christmas episode like this. I know you waited a month, you shameless hussies, to pair to you, right? But I now have to follow the great Gary Mackle and the even greater Paul Howard, and not to mention the wonderful Graham Merrigan and Danny Murray as well. So, but look at lads, I'll sharpen me pencil, I'll do me best. Throw your best ones at me, we'll see what we do with it.
Well, in a word, what was the review the Christmas special?
Majestic is the word I would use for that. I mean, it's just, I was around during the This Is Content era, so I know how this sausage is made. And I was just listening to that. And it just, it was kind of like what the last episode of Stranger Things should have been, right? There was tangents. There was amazing, unbelievable, almost science fiction-like conversations. And there was also a sort of a very satisfying ending, which Stranger Things definitely didn't have in my book, But it was tremendous listening. And it's become such a part of it, the Christmas period since I got to know you. And I also know the fact that the two of you are sort of deeply unreliable narrators, as we were saying before, right? And I was thinking, will I actually get a Christmas episode this year because of the busy cadences of your lives? And it arrived just in perfect timing when I was sort of collecting me turkey from the Butcher's Deli in Stockholm and wrapping the last of the presents and that kind of thing, So it was just brilliant to be able to drive around and listen to that for 2 hours of unadulterated Yuletide bliss is what that was.
We were never going to let the Christmas pass without, we were very unreliable in 2025, such was the nature of the year that was and all that. But it was nice to do it, and it was lovely to get even this reaction, lovely, but it was lovely to get people reaching out to say, great to hear you back, and a wonderful episode. And as one of our listeners, Brian, got in touch with me, and I'm going to read the message. He goes, another brilliant Christmas prod, bit hostile towards the end, but very enjoyable.
But is that not Christmas in a nutshell? Very enjoyable, bit hostile towards the end. I'll see you next year.
When we've all had a bit too much turkey and one sherry too many, that's where the hostility begins and the merriness leaves us. But listen, we'll try to be more consistent in this 2026 CE. Did you cop this change in years, Phil? Not 2025 to 2026, but this whole BCE CE rather than BCAD thing.
This has completely passed me by altogether.
I've only copped it in recent months, and I was like, what's going on here? And
what is going on?
So I'll explain very quickly. And when I found out the reason for it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to push this because I'm all in favour of it. So BC obviously was before Christ, AD, Anno Domini, after the fact, right, in Latin.
Yes.
Very religious connotations and all of that. They've now started to shift to remove the church's control over the narrative. They're keeping the timeline, but it's now BCE, before Common Era, CE, Common Era. So you won't see 2026 AD anywhere except for your Christian religion paraphernalia.
I'm all for that.
Do you know what? Just sign me up for that as well. I was starting to think now, we're actually doing this on Zoom. I know people are listening to this and they won't be seeing the video, but Danny's head went up a little bit, which led me to believe he was up on his high horse there for a second.
Always.
And I'm absolutely stunned that usually when that happens, I go, oh no, I'm not buying into this now. This could be, I don't know, some of that woke nonsense that he's famous for, But it turned out to be a good one. Fair play to you, Dan. That's a great way to start the second month of the new year, in fairness.
Isn't it just? Yeah, anything that involves the power being wrestled from the paws of the church, I'm in favour of. I'm going to try and do a segue now into the Winter Olympics. And to be honest with you, I'm fucking very tired, lads. Having a child that's teething in the house has taught me sleep doesn't exist. So my ability to segue from one nonsense waffle that I have to another nonsense waffle that I have has completely left me. So Phil, you're in Italy for the Olympics.
My dog started, lads. Sorry, it's fucking pungent.
I was just going to say that Danny completely missed the ability to do a time-space continuum thing there, moving into a sleeplessness as Mero sprays the room to get rid of Suggsy's farts, which also affect the time-space continuum, if the truth be told. That's why he has to use the spray. Indeed, Daniel, I am speaking to you from about 6 kilometres from the Austrian border with Italy. I'm on the Italian side in a place called Anterselva. And those of you, the sporting connoisseurs among the great listeners of the What's the Story podcast will understand that we're here because the Winter Olympics is taking place in Milano Cortina in northern Italy. And lads, it's absolutely bonkers, right? Because the way an Olympics is synonymous with a city, right? The Tokyo Olympics, the London Olympics, where most things happened in, strangely enough, Tokyo or London. That is not the case here, lads, right? Because I landed into said Milano Cortina on Monday, and I left there yesterday morning, the Tuesday as we're speaking, and it took me 10 hours to get to where I'm speaking to you from today, right? So I got a train to Venezia. And then a 4-hour bus journey, and we went up every mountain and down every dale in the whole country, and all it did was it brought me to the middle of nowhere. Like, I'd love to show you what's outside the window here, but it's just black dark, And I'm here. This is my 4th Winter Olympics, and to be honest, I absolutely love it. Winter sports are brilliant, and I'm covering the sport of biathlon, which is one of the most dramatic sports that you could possibly watch, because it's a combination of cross-country skiing and shooting. So if you miss a couple of shots, like, everything can sort of be decided on the range, or if somebody has a little bit of power left in the legs, like the last stage of the Tour de France, they can win it, The only objection I have is that there's no other sports on around here, because I would love to, the last few Olympics I did loads of different stuff. I did cross-country skiing, I did Nordic combined, I did ski jumping, freestyle skiing, snowboarding, all that kind of thing. But now I've only one sport, because everything else is like 2 hours away, so I'll be doing the same thing. So in one way, a man of my advancing years, I should be relaxing, settling down into one sport. But the other part of my brain that goes, hey, the sport happening not too far away, is just sort of, it's in panic mode at this stage. But I'm sure I'll find some way of occupying myself.
How many sports are there in the Winter Olympics?
I couldn't tell you offhand, right? But I will tell you that you have sliding sports. So that's the luge, and you have the bobsled, and you have all those other things. You have the skating sports. You have figure skating. You have ice hockey. You have speed skating, long track and short track. Freestyle skiing and snowboarding. Cross-country skiing is a huge amount of medals. I think there's around about 110 or 120 medals handed out, right? And of them, at the last Olympics, I had editorial responsibility for more than half, and I would have written probably about 30 or 40% of those stories myself, So it was absolutely brilliant. But in biathlon alone, there's 11 gold medals to be had, lads, so that's plenty. There's 17 days of competition, and there's certain sports. One of the lads was saying today, it's like, if you have volleyball and handball in the Summer Olympics and you get that, that's the longest day imaginable, because there's just group games that go on forever, and they play every single day, right? And the problem with that is that it doesn't really matter, because you're playing tonight. I think as we're speaking, the curling is starting, and nobody can be eliminated from the Olympics before the opening ceremony. So it doesn't matter if you lose your curling match tonight or tomorrow night, you're still in with a chance. It's just seedings or that kind of thing. And I remember that was one of the things that I did the first of the major freestyle skiing and snowboarding at the Sochi Olympics in Russia back in 2014. And the IOC realised that they were going to eliminate people on the Thursday, and the games weren't opening to the Friday. So at 5 to 9 in the morning, with the competition due to start at 9 o'clock, they had to say, oh, by the way, this is only for seeding. None of the, they were supposed to be seeding, but the top 24 were supposed to go through. And they said, we can't eliminate anybody, so we just have to have everybody. So today's competition is just for seeding, and everybody was just sort of suicidal, because it was like, okay, now none of this means anything, But it's amazing. And what's also fascinating about the place I'm in at the moment, right? So I'm in the north of Italy, but more than half the people around here would be German speaking. The region is called South Tyrol, and just up to the Austrian border. So this is a place that sort of came into being. It's always been here, but in its current state, it came into being after the Second World War, and its fate eventually was only decided in 1972, actually. So it's a place where most people are German speaking. It's a very Germanic culture. The food we would have had at dinner here at the hotel tonight, an awful lot of it would be very Germanic rather than this of the Italian influence. So people here primarily would speak German. If you don't speak German, they'll speak Italian to you. And if you don't speak Italian back and you try to speak English to them, you're kind of going nowhere, because not too many people speak English around here, But like everything else with the Olympics, it's a great opportunity to experience these cultures that you wouldn't otherwise get, In other places like Cortina, where maybe the alpine skiing, like the kind of thing that we would have seen on Ski Sunday growing up as kids, where that's happening, it's a completely different culture again. So it's an honour and a privilege to be here and to be able to immerse myself in these things and to be able to talk to you about them.
And you're there for riders, Phil. So if people want to, because from the summer games and from World Cups, your articles are brilliant. So where can people read your articles?
So most of this will turn up on Reuters.com. I'm always very careful, Graham, when I'm on podcasts like this to say that I'm not speaking to people this evening as a representative of Reuters, right? Because Reuters, we don't do opinion. We only do facts. Like, I literally know what's on the public record, what I've witnessed and what people have said to me myself, you know? So I wouldn't like to come across as somebody who does that. But I've worked for the company now since 2002. So I'm into my 24th year of working for them. It's been a tremendous schooling. It's been a tough school at times and that, but I think that was the makings of me in journalism was having the education and having to deal with things the way that Reuters says, you know. So, for instance, I can't put a Milan byline on a story from Anterselva. I have to put Anterselva Italy because I'm not in Milan. And a simple thing like that, you know, sometimes people will put their name to a story and it might be a Tottenham Hotspur match in London. And, you know, a newspaper will say, oh, this fella was in London when he was in Manchester and that. Not even that will be got away with here, you know. I can't say that something was said to me that wasn't said directly to me, right? So I can't go onto the RTE website or onto joe.ie and say, you know, so-and-so said this, you know, Stephen Bradley of Shamrock Rovers told me this when he actually told it to Mark McCann of the Star. I can't do any of that, like, you know. So in this sort of how the sausage is made in journalism, they really, really are sticklers for the rules, you know, and the kind of things that you're allowed to say as well.
Thing, like, no?
I absolutely think so, because if I give an opinion, I have to be able to motivate that opinion with fact. And for the most part, they don't want to hear my opinion. Reuters go, they don't care what I think about anything, right? Now, today I was writing a piece about this particular region, and Anterselva, Antholz Anterselva is the name of the place, the biathlon centre, right? Antholz being a German word, Anterselva being the Italian word. And biathlon is absolutely massive here. These people are into it like people where you live are into Shamrock Rovers, perish the thought, right? But I try to communicate that to people because it's such a part of their lives here. Like, you know, the hotel here, there's cross-country tracks out the back. You can hire skis anywhere you go here. Pretty much any supermarket, they'll give you a pair of skis, you know. And I want to be able to tell that story. In order to do so, sometimes you might have to take a little bit of poetic license, where today I was writing about the crack of the rifle shots off the range and that kind of thing, you know. And somebody might say that, oh, that's not, you know, it is factual, that kind of thing, but you're straying into sort of, you know, commentary on things like that, and they don't really like that. So there's a very fine line that you shouldn't really step over in terms of giving an opinion that cannot be backed up by fact. You know, there was a crack off that and it was echoing off the Alps around us, so to speak, you know. And I do think that, you know, I'm sure it's a subject that we're going to talk about because we usually talk about media when we get on these things. But there's a lot to be said for it now, in particular, in an era where, you know, of AI, of artificially generated content, of images, of videos, of pictures of Jeffrey Epstein and Michal Martin that can't be believed and that kind of thing. That if we're going to recreate any sort of faith in the media, we need to have outlets like Reuters. And Reuters get things wrong, right? Because, you know, we always say get it first, but first get it right. And when I have to issue a correction, which I will invariably have to do because the amount of stuff I'll write over the next while, I'll spell somebody's name wrong, or I'll, you know, something like that. I'll get the time wrong in a race or that kind of thing. I have to go out in big capital letters. It will say correction. And then it will say, you know, it fixes the spelling of Graham Merrigan's name in paragraph 3 or whatever. So my mistakes and my corrections are all matters of the public record. There's no hiding from them, and I have plenty of them, but they are corrected publicly. Whereas with certain newspapers in Ireland, the Irish Times, when they correct something, they don't bother to do that publicly. You know, if I say to them, look, that didn't happen in Stockholm, that happened in Gothenburg, they'll go in, they correct it, but they will just pretend that didn't happen at all. And I think we lose credibility as journalists when we don't own our own mistakes. We don't know everything, and what we know to be true at this particular moment may change in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour. But when we do make a mistake, we have to own it, because otherwise Graham and Danny and everybody listening to this podcast and their mums and dads and everybody who consumes media cannot trust what we do, and that trust is what the whole job of journalism is all about.
I've just looked up the area you're in, Phil, because I'm fascinated by the geography of this, and you're closer to some of the bigger cities in Austria than you are Milan. This is
yes.
It's like so. Not, I don't know why I'm going this direction of everything you thought. We will get onto the sport and biathlon, and for me, one of the big stories that's coming out of all this is Lindsey Vonn as well in the skiing. But why in the name of Jesus did they send you into Milan when it looks like, you know, you've got at least 4 airports closer?
So basically what the Olympics is, it's a huge transport/logistics operation with a bit of sport tacked on the side, right? There is a network of buses that has been created, lads, that go between the different venues and the different hubs. And I can get a bus now. I can walk 800 meters down to the motorway here, the road here, and I can get on a bus and I can get to any other Olympic venue just inside this bus network, right? Now, it might take me anything up to 18 hours because the New York Times have done the calculations on this to get from here to the luge or whatever happens to be, right? But that's how it exists. Now, one of the main hubs in Milan, and this is always a conference centre in the centre of the host city, and that's what they call the MPC, the main press centre, right? Then you have the main media centre, and then you have the International Broadcast Centre. These three are invariably all in the one place. My accreditation, that is what gets me into all the stadiums and all the trainings and the press conferences, that was in Milan. In previous years, they've been posted out to us, especially if you're going to be somewhere like, the last Summer Olympics in Paris, the surfing competition was held somewhere in the South Pacific. I can't remember the name of the island. I think it might have been Tahiti, actually, because that was formerly a French protectorate. So obviously that person wouldn't have to go to Paris first to collect their accreditation and then be sent out there. So under normal circumstances, but this time around, for some reason, they decided that we were going to collect them for the main press centre. So I had to go there. And when I go there, they give me a kit, right? Now, this is fucking bizarre, pardon my French, because like I live in Scandinavia, so I have winter clothes and everything else like that, But I have to go there and they collected a jacket, which probably isn't as warm as the stuff I have in the wardrobe back home. But they told me they were giving it to me. And it's Reuters branded and that, because you want people to know who they're talking to and that, So I had to go and collect all that stuff. And then yesterday was the train to Venezia. And then it was the 4-hour bus ride up through the Alps, or the Dolomite Mountains, which are part of the Alps. And then it was a taxi waiting at the end of it to drive me here to the hotel. So I left the hotel in Milano at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I got here last night at 8:15, So that was why we ended up down there. It would have been better, and it would. I'll probably look at it now. I don't have to go back to Milan, but I'm flying into Malpensa Airport, one of the airports there, and I got to probably talk to the logistics people and say, look, I'll just hot-foot it up the road to Salzburg and get out of here that way, because that 10 hours yesterday, I didn't need that at the start of the Olympics, lads. No. You don't do anything, but travelling can be quite tiring in its own way. And then I was just talking to two of the Swedish guys I know from the Expressen newspaper, one of the biggest newspapers in Sweden, two absolute biathlon experts. They're tremendous people, and they were dropped off and they had to bring their suitcases through the 800 meters, through the snow and that kind of thing. And the two guys were just exhausted, hauling it through that, because it's actually snowing at the moment, So and again, I'm just a sort of a cog in this major operation. Like Reuters has probably 100 people here between TV, photographers, text journalists, that kind of thing. And I'm there going, you couldn't get me to an airport. Look at lads, it's such a privilege to be here. I'm not going to complain about that.
To be fair, you weren't saying that, Phil. That was just me out of curiosity looking it up and looking at it and going, as somebody who despises travel, I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh God, that would set me off in a mood that would last for the duration of the Olympics.
But it's actually part of the whole thing, Dan. Like, I remember when I wrote the book about Gaelic football in Stockholm 15 years ago, and I dedicated it to my two daughters, Saoirse and Freya, and I said it's all about the journey, because sometimes the travelling and that kind of thing, there's a brilliant photographer now called Matt Childs that I'm working with. You always want to see who you're working with, and it's like, because some people you get along with and some people are great crack. There's a Japanese photographer who's absolutely brilliant called Kato-san, but Kato-san, it's hard to have, humour or banter or that kind of crack with him, because his cultural frames of reference are completely different. He doesn't support Liverpool or this kind of thing, So if you have people who are culturally similar to yourself, and they might come from Serbia or Sweden or wherever, but Matt's a great bloke and we get on really well. And the real joy of this is in working shoulder to shoulder with colleagues and with competitors and that kind of thing, and the stories and the crack that happen, and that really what makes it. In Pyeongchang 8 years ago, I was in a hotel with two guys, I was going to say Dylan Moran, he's actually a comedian. Dylan Martinez is the name of one photographer. He was Reuters chief photographer in the UK and Ireland for a long time. And Mike Blake. And I used to come back at night. Mike lives in Encinitas, which is just south of Los Angeles. And Mike, these two guys would just tell you stories. Jesus, if you think I could tell a yarn, boys, these two fellas are just off the charts. And I sat there spellbound one night as Mike Blake was telling me about helicopters fighting over Michael Jackson's funeral, right? And everybody wanting to get the shot of the casket being brought into the crematorium or wherever it was being brought into, and pilots radioing each other and swearing and going, oh, you had your 5 minutes over, now it's my turn, kind of thing. Like, and this is the kind of childish business that was going on above one of the biggest entertainment stories of that year, or perhaps ever, you know. And those are things that just come rolling out of people now. And there's always things like, you know, I better say this quietly, but the place I'm staying in is kind of like the German version of Fawlty Towers, right? I came in here last night, lovely people, right? The best of crack. Don't speak, I speak a tiny little bit of German, tiny little bit of Italian. I understand more than I can say, you know. So I went in and I met Matt, my photographer, and he's sitting there, and I called him up and said, look, I'm on the way there, you know, and he's sitting down having his dinner. And I said, could I order some dinner? And the woman said, no. I said that to her in Italian, you know, and she said, is it possible to order some dinner? I said, no. And I said, why? And she said, we're closed. And I'm looking at me mate sitting across the table with a grand big chicken leg in front of him and going, are you sure? Are you really sure? And that was the thing then, like, you know, we had to get up this morning, and because we knew we were going to be eating in the hotel, you have to order your dinner at breakfast time, right? And this is the kind of thing that would drive Danny Murray absolutely bananas. It would. And it drives me slightly bananas too, but secretly, lads, I love it. But look at it, you know, we're getting a podcast out of it, lads. I mean, this is what I do for a living.
And this is it. When we said we were going to talk about the Winter Olympics, I didn't think we'd be going down the logistics road. But can I take a very, very, very quick somewhat personal segue there, Phil? You mentioned your lovely daughters. And
yes.
A couple of weeks ago, or maybe even longer, my memory is going in this day and age. I saw you posted that you had what I'd like to say is a gorgeous moment where you got to do a gig with one of them.
Jesus, yeah, that's right, Dan. So my 21-year-old daughter, Ingrid Saoirse O'Connor, who just goes by the name of Saoirse, she moved out about 2.5 years ago, and she went to university in a town called Linköping, which is about 2 hours south of Stockholm. And she took one of the guitars in the house with her. Now, she'd been strumming away, tipping away a little bit, you know. And, you know, people used to ask me, how's it going for her in university? And I would say to them, she's getting very good at the guitar, lads, you know. So she spent more time learning songs on the guitar. And the great thing about this, music lovers that you both are, right, when you can share that with your child, right? When they're talking to you about the Mary Wallopers, and about Christy Moore, and about Bruce Springsteen, and about Pete Seeger and Bob Seeger and the entire Seeger clan, you know, and she's pulling songs out that she might have seen on Tumblr and this kind of thing, like, and she said, how can I play that? And how do I play that sort of more sort of waltz rhythm that you sometimes play songs? And like, it's a fantastic thing to share, right? Now, I played for many years in bands in Dublin and all over the place, and I played professionally in all the pubs in Sweden at the very beginning to make a few quid, right? It's a difficult life. And she said to me then, you know, late last year, maybe October, she said, I'd love to do a gig. I said, okay, I'll do it with you, right? Because I didn't want her going into a pub full of drunks with expectations on her own and standing there, because it could be like a waterfall, it could be like an avalanche, you know, coming at you. And I said, let's do one when you're home over Christmas. So I got onto the great Athenry man, Martin Hessian, who owns Veerstrom's pubs in Stockholm. One is in an old bakery in the old town, and the other is in very much the city centre, down the road from where Reuters used to have their office there. I said, Martin, is there any chance myself and my daughter might play in the pub? He said, absolutely. So the 29th, Monday the 29th of December, and we just sort of thought, we'll sit in the corner and we'll plug in all the microphones and that kind of thing, but it'll be a fairly sort of, you know, inauspicious start. And sure, I mentioned it to one or two people, and then the WhatsApp groups lit up, you know, like, you know, the kind of places that Graham Merrigan gets called a bully, you know, that kind of WhatsApp group. And then all of a sudden, like, all the Irish who were left in Stockholm celebrating Christmas all said that they'd come down. I went, okay, so, you know, now we have to do this and we have to do it properly. And it turned out absolutely brilliant, Dan, because my missus was saying, like, sometimes as a father, you're kind of protective, like, you know, and I don't want her to fail. I don't want her to feel that, you know, you sing a bum note, you forget the words or that kind of thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be entertaining, you know. So I sang a couple of tunes, but I let her start off. And one of the best things about it was, I don't know if you know a Fleetwood Mac song, you probably know it, Danny, called Dreams. You know that? It's off the Rumours album, right? Yeah. And we used to do that when I was playing in Dublin. We were too lazy to do a sound check, so there's pretty much only 2 chords in Dreams, right? You know, you can play it with F and G or whatever. And we used to play that in all the pubs of Dublin, like in what used to be Barnstormers down on Townsend Street on a Friday night. And rather than do a soundtrack, we'd just get up 3 minutes early and we'd start to play Dreams and we'd work everything out. And we started with that, and it was like, for me, it was a sort of a full circle thing of when I started playing music when I was 16 in Dublin for something to do, and now at 54, and my daughter's playing that and singing, and I'm sitting singing harmonies beside her and playing the guitar, and it was absolutely amazing to be able to share that, because music is such a connector between us. Like, you know, if we were to start talking about Bruce Springsteen now or Christy Moore now, as we've done before, we could lose an hour just talking about these things, you know. And I was talking to her about how to construct a set list and how to read the room and how to see what people are enjoying, how to give them more of that, how to bring them up, how to take them back down, how to realize when they need a break to go to the bar and that kind of thing, you know, and how you pace yourself as well. Because, you know, it's a bit like being in a boxing match. You know, if you throw all your digs at the start, then you've nothing left for the rounds when things are decided, you know. And that's literally what playing music live is like in some places that I've been in the world, you know. So it was that kind of thing. And she had a great time. And we all had a great time. And, you know, Martin was, like, as I say, Martin Hessian is just a wonderful man in the Irish community in Sweden, runs brilliant pubs, food, drinks. Anybody's over there, go and visit him, you know. But it was tremendous altogether. Would I do it again? I don't know. I wouldn't rule it out. Like, you know, I had a great time not being the main guy, just sitting there noodling away with my guitar in the background. But it was something when I moved to Sweden in 1999, I never would have expected that I would have that possibility.
Amazing.
Daddy.
That was a segue that was worthwhile, or sorry, a detour that was worthwhile. I'm delighted I asked now, and delighted that you got that moment with Saoirse as well. It's a gorgeous little story, Phil.
It was amazing, you know. And it's one of those things when you sort of sit there, like, it's a good thing I was playing the guitar, because I had a temptation to pinch myself on a couple of occasions, like, you know, because we'd sat at home. Oh God, there's a Taylor Swift song that she loves to play, Love Story, right? Oh, yeah. And we sat at home playing that, you know, and a couple of days. So she came up like maybe the 22nd of December, and any time there was nothing happening, we go into the living room and she brought her guitar up and I sat down and we played away and we were going. And, you know, again, my wife was sort of doing that thing. She's afraid that we weren't well enough prepared. I was going, do you have any idea? I'll tell you the story, chaps, right? The Pigeon Club in Ballyfermot, a fine establishment, right? There was one night back after I met Maria, it must have been Valentine's Day, around about 1995 or so, right? And Maria was back in Sweden. And there's myself and a chap called Dave Brown, who played on the Strip in Las Vegas for 10 years and is now playing the Irish bars the length and breadth of Manhattan, right? And he called me up, and Dave is from Cuff Street Flats, just off Grafton Street there, the roughest, toughest, nicest people you'd ever meet. And he rings me up and he goes, is your board away? And I went, yeah. I said, all right, my board's away as well, right? There's a bloke after ringing me and he wants us to do a gig at the Pigeon Club. Are you up for it? I went, all right. And you don't ask any more questions than that of Dave Brown. I've known the chap since I was a teenager. And we ended up going into the Pigeon Club in Ballyfermot, and there was a chap called Peter who I'd never met before, and he had a guitar and he had a drum machine and he had a weird haircut where his hair didn't move at all. Like, that was very suspicious, right? So we went in anyway, and we thought we're playing Valentine's Day. I'd never met, like, I played with Dave for years, but I'd never played with this other guy before, and he was to be doing most of the singing. I literally stood up there, and your man turns around, he says, okay, these are the songs I do. And Dave Brown goes, let me stop you there. That won't be necessary. We can play absolutely anything. We'll just watch you and off we go. And that same night, a gentleman had been released. He had been a guest of the nation in Mountjoy prison. And he had come out and he had decided that he was going to pay a visit to the lovely Pigeon Club in Ballyfermot to celebrate his freedom. And he decided that he wanted to sing Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash. And we kicked into it. And he came up and he took the microphone. And we probably played it 7 times. And look at lads, I wasn't going to be the man to tell him we were done. So we just kept at it. And
he must have heard the train coming for so long it eventually arrived, did it?
No, this is Ireland. It never showed up at all. He was left on the platform, you know. But it was like, that was just one of those things, like one of those situations that you wind up in. And it was kind of a little bit, when he told us he was going to play the song, it was like, you lads don't have any choice in this, because if you don't play this song, I'm going to wreck his kind of thing, you know. So, terrible nice chap all the same. Did a great version of Folsom Prison Blues. I wish I could have heard him sing another song, but that may be for another occasion.
Indeed. Come here. That was a good detour, and I've no segue for the next topic I want to talk about, because it's quite dark.
Oh, hang on, we're not done with the Winter Olympics yet. You can get onto your darkness in a minute, man.
All right, go on. Sorry, I thought we were done with the Winter Olympics.
No, hang on. Let's just quickly roll back, because I do enjoy it. So you can shoot your shot in a minute, but speaking of shooting your shot, the biathlon.
That's a good segue.
There we go. I haven't lost it just yet.
Lads, are you in for a treat or what, right? If you have never watched biathlon at the Winter Olympics, get it on your television, right?
Well, I have to be honest, I never even heard of it until Danny mentioned it.
Mero. Have you watched any Winter Olympics at all, ever?
Ice hockey and curling and figure skating.
Right. You're missing a huge wealth of brilliant sports.
Absolutely. This is the thing.
It's all right? on TNT as well, so I'm going to try and get stuck into it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so on Sunday afternoon, right, and this will be, you will lose your biathlon virginity on Sunday afternoon, right, and I think you will become a convert to the ways of this sport, right. I
Brilliant.
think it's the mixed relay is the start of it, and basically what it is it's cross country skiing and then shooting 5 shots at targets that are 50 meters away, right. The distances can be different. You can shoot standing and you can shoot prone, which is lying down on your stomach, right. As I say, the targets are 50 meters away, and there's various different penalties depending on the competition, right. So it might be that, okay, you miss, and then you have to put another bullet in the gun, and that's after costing you a couple of seconds. It might be that you get a time penalty of 30 seconds or a minute. It might be that you have to you have to go through a penalty lap, right, which might take 30 or 40 seconds, but it also expend more
Love a
energy
penalty
than your
lap.
competitors,
Love the
right.
drama a penalty lap brings into it.
Unbelievable, right? So one of the guys who's not here this year, he won 4 gold medals and 1 silver or bronze at the last Olympics, is a guy called Johannes Boe. Johannes was such a great skier that he could leave his rifle at home and still beat everybody, right? This guy was just incredible. I've seen him miss so many times, and people go, no, he's out. And I go, no, he will win this race. Like, you know, he'd be 40 seconds behind coming onto the final lap, and the guy just had afterburners on. Whereas there are others who are just brilliant shots, like Laura Dahlmeier, Lord rest her, a brilliant biathlete who passed away in a mountaineering avalanche recently, a German. Her shooting one night, I saw her, I was just absolutely incredible. And what the key skill is the physical control they have to exert as they ski into the shooting range, lads. Their pulse is up to not 90 but 190, right? A very lightweight rifle off your back. It's a 22 caliber rifle, and you have to get your breathing and your pulse under control, because if you're breathing heavily and you have, like, you know, a gun to your shoulder, and you're setting your sights on a target 50 meters away, if you just breathe in now, lads, your shoulders are going to go up, your chest is going to go up. That's what your rifle is resting against. And they have to find the rhythm. They have to bring their pulse right down, their breathing right down, and then they have to do that 5 times in a row and hit those 5 targets. And the ability to miss, and it's always one of the French guys was talking about it today, Eric Perrault, he'll be one of the favourites now that you'll see in the mixed relay. He was saying that because he's been doing free diving, like, you know, diving into water, going down to depths of 30 metres, not able to breathe at all, because he needs to be able to control his breathing when he gets there at the Olympics. And the absolute best and the worst thing of biathlon is when you ski in there, it's in front of all the spectators, everybody is watching you, and you're in there with a 20 or a 25 second lead, and you're in there first, and you load up that gun, and you have 5 shots with the world watching, and everybody knows that if you miss, you're in deep shit altogether. And of course, who's coming in after you? Some guy is after tearing in there after you, and he's full of piss and vinegar, and by Jesus, there's no way he's going to miss anything. And just in every race, it doesn't matter if it's a 15k race, if it's a 20k race, if it's a 6k race, it doesn't, the sprints, it does not matter. That drama and the potential for it is always there. Le meilleur, the best, as I always call him when I see him, is a guy called Martin Fourcade, who's a Frenchman who was a soldier. Now, he retired after the Pyeongchang Games, but he was one of these guys where he just had that kind of thing, you know, like a boxer who never gets knocked out. He was never, like, you know, kind of like with certain football teams, you think they never get beaten, the clock just runs out on them, you know. But Martin's, his ability to handle pressure was absolutely incredible. The Urbe sisters, Hannah and Elvira Urbe, Hannah won, I think she won a relay gold, no, she won the pursuit gold, sorry, the individual gold in Pyeongchang, and then her sister, 4 years younger, came on and she won gold in the same relay team as her sister 4 years later in Beijing, like, you know. And these two, like, they will end up in the relays, they'll end up competing together, and in the other races they'll be competing against one another, you know. And it's just like the level of drama in this is just absolutely unbelievable, and it can literally turn on a dime, like, you know. And that's why, to me, of all the sports, you know, I mean, I know everybody gets into curling in Ireland and Scotland and that kind of thing, and the BBC do a great job of showing it, but if you want, you know, to have your pulse at the same level of the athletes, then the biathlon is what you need to be tuning into on TNT.
Yeah, biathlon is genuinely, if you're watching any Winter Olympics, if you've never watched it and you're going, do you know what, right, I'll give it a look, it's only on every 4 years after all, biathlon is a great place to start. I would, any of the skiing sports generally, I find brilliant. The freestyle skiing, or the ski cross as it was before, fucking unbelievable.
Oh, I watched that before. Yeah, I watched that
and
before.
the snowboard do it as well, I think. But when it comes to skiing, right, there's a name everyone probably knows and they probably don't know much about her, which is one of those names that kind of transcends the sport, and that's Lindsey Vonn, right? No, you've heard of Lindsey Vonn before. You have. So Lindsey Vonn is 41 years of age, right? She retired from sport in 2019 and made a comeback there, I think maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. In the build-up, I think, was it last week or the week before last, in, I think it was a World Cup race, She had a fall and she's ruptured her ACL. 41 years of age with a ruptured ACL, and this mad animal of an athlete is taken to the skis on Sunday anyway. Like, I wanted to win just for that. Whatever about our history, whatever about our being one of the biggest names in sport and everything else, I've ruptured my ACL, lads. I cried a lot. I certainly would. I wouldn't get on skis now, never mind when I actually did my ACL. And this mad thing is like, sure, if I go out on one leg, I go out on one leg. What's it like? I mean, it's going to be the same recovery time, roughly, rather I do the other ligament, the other 3 ligaments to go alongside it. So I'm going to go for it. It's insane, but it's hooking people in with a story and giving that amount of edge that sport often gives us. And I love it.
So this is why Olympians are different from you and me. Maybe not Mero, because Mero, I think, has represented his country in basketball, so he's up there with the elite as well. But you and me, Danny, we're just mere mortals in this way, right? I was there when Lindsey Vonn retired the first time, because she had the press conference in Östersund in Sweden, and I got a train up there overnight to talk to her and to interview her after the press conference. And Lindsey is one of those people that when you meet her, there is nothing in that woman, there isn't a cell in that woman's body that isn't about winning, right? You cannot do these sports at that level for this long and just be average, right? There's just none of them are like these things eat people up. The danger that she's put and the pressure she's putting her body under is absolutely incredible. And when the story broke, I was surprised, because when she came back, I was going, yeah, no, she wasn't done when she was talking to me, you know? And that was the thing that sort of that struck me at the time. It was like, okay, she's not done. She's got to be back. And she came back. And oftentimes it's kind of like, again, you know, to use the boxing analogy, you never quit when you're supposed to. It's always 2 or 3 fights too late. And I thought this was a bridge too far for her. Michaela Schifrin, who's a good bit younger. I mean, people are even talking about her, this being her last dance and that kind of thing. And then Lindsey Vonn comes out and goes, yeah, I tore my ACL, so what? And every doctor who is here is, you know, any of them you talk to, they go, that girl's absolutely mad, you know. But the thing is that for her, the juice is worth the squeeze, right? And I don't mean the juice of winning a gold medal or a silver medal or a bronze medal or anything else like that. She wants to stand at that gate one more time. And she wants to feel the thrill of going down the slope at the Olympics. The World Cup is great. We all love the World Cup and everything else like that, right? But at the Olympics, to be an Olympian for, it must be the 4th or 5th time, this must be our 5th Olympics now, to do that 5 times and to still have people talking about you and using your name as a possible contender. Now, I can't see it. Like, skiing it's so, like, the knees are what you need, really, because that's what transfers, and like that's where, you know, your speed comes from there, your direction, all how you steer yourself, it all comes through that. I just don't know if it's possible. I mean, it's possible for her to do it. What kind of time she's got to put in, I don't know. But that's also one of those stories. And they're the great stories of the Olympics, even for people who don't win medals. I mean, there'll be great stories of gold medal winners and that kind of thing. But it's the stories of overcoming adversity. And that's what I find so inspiring about being around these people, is that they do it for, like, sometimes there's an awful selfishness in people to do that. There's just an eye of the tiger where they just will not be denied something. But sometimes it's the idea that I was put on this earth to do this. You know, I can inspire people. I can inspire women of my own age who are 41 and sitting at home, maybe eating a bag of crisps, watching this, and say to her, look, if I can do this, maybe you need to get down to the gym there. Maybe you can start living a better life. Maybe you can start looking at improving yourself, you know? And that's what so many people in particular, and I mean, I write a lot about women's sport, and if I have a chance to give a woman a platform through Reuters.com, I will absolutely do it 9 times out of 10, you know? And those are the stories that inspire other people, you know, that they're the real stories of the Olympics, because, you know, I think it was Danny Blanchflower said it after he was the manager of Spurs, or no, when he played in the Spurs double winning team back in the 60s, and he said, like, you know, winning isn't everything. It's about doing things with a dash and with valor and, you know, not boring people to death, you know. It's about giving people a reason to get up and to watch these things. And that translates into our everyday lives as well. We as sports fans, and Paul and Gary and everybody who listens to this podcast who likes sport, we want to see something being done that we couldn't possibly imagine ourselves. But when we see that being done, we start to imagine a different possible for ourselves. And that's what leads us back to the gym and playing a bit of golf or playing a bit of football or junior B Gaelic football or whatever, or wheelchair basketball or parasport at all, because we may not be able to reach their level, but we can reach our level, and we can all be better through striving to reach our own level and the highest level that we can possibly achieve.
Love that. And thank you for indulging me in that. Mero.
Always.
Phil, is there any Irish athletes in the Winter Olympics?
There is a team of 4 over here at the moment. I think we've 2 alpine skiers, we've 1 freestyle skier, and Thomas Vesgård Maloney, who I've interviewed several times. He's a cross-country skier whose man went on holidays to Spain, met a Norwegian, and all of a sudden he was born in Norway then after that. And Thomas grew up, and I'd love to talk about the issue of Irish identity abroad. I'm one of the few people who might actually sit down and have a cup of Lions tea with Declan Rice and work out what the chap was thinking when he fucking sold us out. But Thomas went to there are skiing schools in Norway where you go there and you ski and you train. There's biathlon schools, they take these things really seriously. And Thomas was skiing with the elite in Norway, and it was just, he wasn't going to get picked for it. And he went, okay, well, I could probably ski for Ireland. I'd be more than happy, he feels as Irish as you or I do, And it's like I say to my own kids, lads, they'd say to me, I'm half Swedish, half Irish. And I've often said, you're not, you're both Swedish and Irish, because there's no separating the Irish half from the Swedish half or the Norwegian half in Thomas's case. And we've had long discussions about this because of the pride that chap feels to go out there in the green, and especially on the last race of the Olympics for men is always the men's 50 kilometre, either free or classic style. I can't remember which it's going to be. That is the toughest race in the Olympics for a cross-country skier, and Thomas has always told me about the pride he feels going out there in the green of Ireland. And you'll have the red and the gold and blue of Norway and the blue and white of Finland, and everybody's expecting to see those things, but Thomas wants people to see the green of Ireland in that field, and that's why he does it. I think he came in, 13th place at one Olympics, which is 10 places off the podium. Absolutely. That's a stunning finish for a nation like ours. And the other good thing about it, lads, is that it involves our diaspora, because, we're 70 million Irish people around the world. There's 70 million people. And I know there are those people who say, oh, they're not really Irish, they've never been to Ireland and that kind of thing. I don't think any of us who don't know them should ever try to define how other people see themselves. And I know kids, like my own kids, as people would accuse me of, basically raising 2 volunteers at points, the way they talk about politics and that kind of thing. But there are kids, and then there are other people. I was only saying it the other night, that in England there are 2 kinds of Irish people. There are people who feel very Irish, and there are English people with Irish parents, and they support the English football team and that kind of thing. And that's fine. How you define yourself is entirely up to your good self, right? But the reverse of that for me then is not to look down on somebody like Thomas just because he was born outside of Ireland and grew up outside of Ireland, because he still does it with as much pride as any of the 3 of us would ever do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I mean, and we felt like that obviously with the Irish team, the Irish football team over the years as well.
Yeah, and over the years, in the beginning, when it came out in the press that Jack Charlton was looking to 2nd and 3rd generation Irish, and John Aldridge and that kind of thing, and it was a rent a paddy thing, and the granny rule and what have you, But when you talk to Ray Houghton and when you talk to some of the lads, and what it also was a catalyst for an awful lot of 2nd and 3rd generation Irish people to start investigating their Irishness more and exploring their Irishness more, because Kate Kerrigan has a brilliant show called Am I Irish Yet? And she was the editor of Smash Hits when all the big boy bands were coming through, Take That and the Backstreet Boys and that kind of thing. And Kate grew up in a very, very Irish family in London. She didn't fit in London because she was just a dirty IRA paddy bitch when she was going to school in London. And then she came home to Ireland on her holidays, and then she was just a tan from across the water. And her whole show is literally called Am I Irish Yet? And when we look at people, of Irish extraction around the world, we're always, and we hate when people sort of claim Irish people who are successful. All of the Smiths, all 4 of them were born to Irish parents in Manchester, right? How many people in Liverpool and in Birmingham and in Sheffield and all these other places that who have names with Macs and O's and everything else there, and they are, whether you like it or not, they are part of the Irish diaspora. Some have a stronger connection than others. Some we're very proud of. Some we'd kind of rather leave be. I mean Morrissey in that particular case, right? But there is such a depth to the whole thing that and that's why I find the whole question of Irish identity so interesting. And it is even more interesting now when I see. I was at the World Ice Hockey Championships because the finals took place in Stockholm last year, and I was talking to some of the American lads, and there was one of the guys whose name was Sean. I can't remember his surname now, you'll have to excuse me, lads, but I asked him where his people were from in Ireland, and he said I don't know. And I found it a little bit sad that because an awful lot of Irish Americans would come over, and of course we laugh at them having their Irish coffee in the the Berkeley Court Hotel or whatever hotels are serving them, we laugh at them and that kind of thing. But I think in one way I think it's almost uncharitable for us to do that, because if these people are trying to find out where they're from, I think we should be definitely rolling out the Céad Míle Fáilte for them.
I agree, yeah. Listen, I just want to change tact here to something a bit more serious, and I'm going to use an Insta story shared by our friend Aoife Moore. She shares an article from Marina Hyde from The Guardian on her Instagram with the headline, "Never forget Epstein's little helpers, the powerful men who knew about his crimes and helped him out anyway." Now, I've yet to read that opinion piece, but Aoife shares it with the words, "None of these men should ever be accepted into polite society ever again. They should not be CEOs, professors, and celebrities anymore. A lot of them likely deserve prison time. They're all sick who actively spend time with a child rapist." Talk to us about that, Phil. Is there going to be accountability? Is anything going to happen? I mean, some of the stuff, there's millions and millions of files obviously already released, but some of the stuff that have been summarized is vile.
The answer to your question, Graham, unfortunately, is no. Because pretty much every one of those people who was involved in that, who was named in that, one of them is the President of the United States. One of them resigned. He was previously Ambassador to the United States of America. Peter Mandelson resigned yesterday. He still has his money. He still has his freedom. Nobody has knocked on the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew's door and locked him up, And I keep making this, this point on social media, going, why don't we just arrest these lads, right? And the truth is that there's no desire to do that, right? Because when you do that, and it's kind of like, we have a sort of a similar situation with the Catholic Church in Ireland, that it's inconceivable how big this is and how much power was involved and how much money was involved, right? Essentially, the whole system as we have it between the West, and by the West I mean, in Europe and in America, right? The whole thing was built on this and these powerful men being able to get away with, in principle, anything that they liked, right? Jeffrey Epstein, if you believe he committed suicide or if you didn't believe he committed suicide, he's really the only one who's been held, and Ghislaine Maxwell as well, because she's sitting in some sort of open prison now, right? But the list, I mean, it's devastating to read the likes of Noam Chomsky, who's, as a professor, and the work he did on the theory of universal grammar and the work that he's done on media and politics, that kind of thing. I have an enormous amount of respect for that man, and his books are going in the bin as soon as they get home, because there he is doing that. There has to be a line in the sand for what we're prepared to accept. And Aoife Moore is entirely right in saying that, who are we if we let these people back in with not as much as a slap on the wrist, right? Who are we if we allow what do they call him? Andrew Mountbatten, is that his name these days? Who are we if we allow that man to die in his own bed at a ripe old age, knowing that one of his victims died by suicide because in part of what he did to her? Who are we as human beings? Who are we as brothers and as fathers and as siblings to these people? Who are we to our wives and to our mothers and our sisters if we allow that to happen? And the extent to which Epstein was able to weave that particular web, and the ease with which people like George Mitchell, a key man in the Irish peace process, was able to take advantage of these things, and these are open secrets, like nobody who was involved in that situation with Epstein, nobody who ever visited that island looked at any of those files and was surprised by any of the other names. They all knew each other. They all knew what went on. They all knew who did what to who. And none of them ever spoke up. And at the same time, these people had the temerity to stand up in public and tell us that brown people were a threat to our women, that trans people are a threat to our women. They invested in media. They insisted that this particular narrative, these particular stories be told. And all the while they themselves were raping children and covering up the rape of children. And I'm sick of watershed moments in my lifetime, lads. You get to what one historian once called the end of history, right? And you think that it has to get better from here. And if there's one thing life has taught me, is that it doesn't, right? This is not a situation where we evolve into something. It's revolution, not evolution. And I think it's only at the point when we stand up and say, look, I'm not buying your newspapers. I'm not watching your TV. I'm not buying your products. I'm not using your social media platforms. I'm not doing any of these kinds of things. And to a certain extent, these things have to cost us as well, right? Because the fact that we put up with this and that we accept that the Taoiseach of Ireland, right, the leader of our democracy, is going to go over and present a rapist, a man who's adjudged in a civil court in New York City to be a rapist, with a bowl of shamrock on or close to our National Day, is a fucking disgrace, gents, right? I do not want any part of the Ireland that Micheál Martin represents if that's what he thinks that we stand for. I do not stand for that. I will never stand for that. And there's an awful lot of other Irish people who don't stand for that. But we sit quietly and we allow it to happen in our name. And if he does it this year, I despise that man and everything he stands for. But this is the end for me, right? It's the end. It should be the end of everything to do with this government if they're allowed to do that. Because give us one thing, right? Because you're not elderly people. You're not going to give us a border polar equality. You're not going to give us action on climate justice or any further form of justice. But at least for once, stand up for the Irish people and say, we don't accept this, but he won't do it. And that is why, if it's going to come from anybody, it has to come from you and from me and from Danny and from Aoife Moore. And we have to say, this is not acceptable anymore. We cannot go on like this.
The thing, Micheál Martin was on Claire Bun's show yesterday, and she asked him the same question. And his response was about the reliance of America in our economy, the reliance of jobs, thousands of jobs. And it read to me like he was basically saying, if we don't go, those jobs will be gone. That's what, and the support for the economy will no longer exist. That's what I took. That's what I interpreted from his response, that he has no choice but to go.
Yeah, right. And I have, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, right? Because Phil, I find it hard to disagree with a point you've made there.
Yeah, me too.
I do have a small degree of sympathy for Micheál Martin, because he's in one of those positions where, as a man, he may hold an opinion to be true to himself, but in the job and in the office, that opinion has to be put to one side because of whatever, right? And I feel like when he's saying those things on radio, whether they agree with him or not, I can see why there's that fear. You're dealing with a volatile lunatic in Donald Trump who operates in the currency of vengeance. And he loves nothing more than to be flattered and to be fawned over and to be treated like he is a special, special man. So this moment, regardless of what he thinks of Micheál Martin in Ireland, regardless of what he thinks of the person who was fawning over him, is the public display of fawning that Trump lives for. So to have that taken away or denied of him, there's going to be a reciprocation of some sort. And I would say the Irish government are probably shitting themselves in fear of what will the lunatic do. Is he going to say, do you know what, forget about Greenland, Ireland is in just as an important strategic place, I want Ireland now to be under the... I'm hyperbolic there, but the point I'm making is that Trump has shown, if anything, in this term, that you cannot second guess what he is going to do. You cannot try and predict what he's going to do. So if you upset the man, and such is the nature of how Ireland is set up economically, and, you know, we've always talked about the close ties to America, blah, 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 blah. I would say the Department of Taoiseach is sitting there going, our hands are tied, we're just going to have to fucking grin and bear it. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I can certainly see that point of view.
Okay, two things, Danny, right? The economy that he is trying to protect by taking this course was one built by no less than Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael over the last century, right? They made us entirely dependent on these American multinationals, right? They literally put us in the jaws of the bear trap and are now, you know, daring themselves not to fucking spring it. The other question I would have asked if I was Claire Byrne, and thankfully I'm not, for the nation and for my good self, right? The question I would have asked Micheál Martin yesterday was, how many rapes are the price that you're willing to pay for the Irish economy, right? My own personal total is 0, right? The number of raped children I'm prepared to accept for jobs in, and, you know, and I, with all respect to people who work for American multinationals, I'm sorry, your job is not worth more to me than the abuse of a child, right? I am not going to turn a blind eye to that. And the fact that I have to say this about one of the Irish political parties, the fact that I have to point out that there is no acceptable level of child rape, will tell you where we still are. Now, again, these lads have form, right? They've let the Catholic Church off the hook. The victims of the Catholic Church are dying by the day, and the compensation that is owed to them and has been owed to them for many years is not going to be paid, right? These are the people that we have chosen to lead us. I'm not one bit surprised at the decisions that they're making. You know, Micheál Martin at one point was in danger of being the only leader of Fianna Fáil never to become Taoiseach, and he did absolutely anything to get that. The man is so incredibly vain. They went to the White House not to represent Ireland, but because they want that picture to hang on their mantelpiece at home, right? He wanted, no, like, Everybody knows what Donald Trump is, from the Access Hollywood tape, from the grab them by the pussy thing that was said, and apologies to any women who are listening who are offended, or anybody else who's offended by that, but from that particular statement, that should have been the end of it, and it wasn't. It was only the beginning. And the last thing I'd say on the subject, Dan, is like, you don't get rid of a bully. You don't give a bully, you don't deal with a bully by giving them what they want, right? And Trump, they have that expression, taco. Trump always chickens out, right? Ireland is not that relevant to him, right? And the last thing he wants to be talking about is the Epstein files and that kind of thing. You saw yesterday where he's gone, I thought it was mostly Democrats, and he just moved on as quickly as possible from it. He doesn't want any hand actor part in this, and he's not going to make a big thing of it, right? Now, could they cause havoc behind the scenes? Absolutely, right? But the fact of the matter is that so many of the things that Trump has tried to do and ended up having to roll back on, there are treaties, there are trade deals, there's all sorts of things in there that he cannot unilaterally just rip up, So the idea that, Micheál Martin would go out there and hide behind this fig leaf, and I don't know if you remember, a couple of years back, it was I asked Mary Lou MacDonald if she was going to go to the White House when the genocide was still ongoing in Palestine, and we put it out in Gaza. And we put it out as a podcast. I gave Mary Lou a hard time over that, and Sinn Féin subsequently didn't go the following year. They went the first year, I think, and they didn't go the second year during the genocide. And did it have any discernible political effect? I don't really know, right? But Sinn Féin are still there, and they're still welcome in these circles. And the other point is, I don't fucking care. Right? We should not be there in that room. Would you go to Vladimir Putin on March 17th if you thought he was going to invest in Shannon Airport and give him a bowl of shamrock in the middle of, if he was in the Epstein files and had invaded Ukraine? You wouldn't. Why are we giving special treatment to these people? And that's before we even get into the idea of what he's doing with ICE and Minnesota and Minneapolis and all these things. And I think that what we're really lacking in Ireland, and we've had this time and time again, is we're lacking leadership, right? The Irish politicians don't lead, they follow. They're looking over their shoulder at somebody else to tell them where to go. And I'm sick and fucking tired of it. And I really think that there's an opportunity here for Ireland to say, on this day, on the 17th of March, we're going to lead. We're going to send a signal to everybody else, because it's not like Trump is any great friend of Europe anyway. So let's just rip the plaster off, hair and all, and let's see where this lands. Because at some point, somebody has to stand up and say this is wrong.
Absolutely. I'd be like, again, I don't disagree with anything you said, Phil. And I think, like, if you look at recent actions, right, you look at Davos, and again, you look at the way the world leaders fawn over him, or they try to, and the only one who had a shred of credibility leaving that thing was Mark Carney of Canada. And you're looking at him and you're saying, why can't the rest of them follow him? If they're going to follow anyone,
yeah, and he has a land border with Trump. Like, this is a dangerous game he's playing. Well, have you noticed, lads, that over the last few weeks, there hasn't been a mention of Greenland since Davos? Because he was taken aside and told, basically, stop talking through your hair here, pal. You're absolutely ruining the buzz for everybody. And you don't ruin the buzz in Davos no more than you would do on Epstein's Island, right? You need to fucking toe the line. And it's just gone out of his head, right? The man is demented. Like, literally, I would say at this stage, demented. Yeah. He's 80 years old. He's not going to last much longer. Now, what comes and replaces him in the form of J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller and those guys, I think it's going to be 100 times worse, right? But for what he is and for who he is at the moment in time, this is literally the easiest geopolitical win ever. Because what if Ireland says, right, well, if the US isn't going to do that, China, let's go. Start opening your BYD electric car factories in Ireland. That kind of, these things aren't impossible. And absolutely, there could be a little bit of a downturn. But, as I say, the price for me is just too high to stand there. There are certain things I can't accept in this world, lads. And that is absolutely one of them. How could I go home to my girls, and look them in the eye after doing something like that? I honestly can't get my head around the class of man who can separate himself from his title in that way. Because if it was me, like, if the Irish government said to me, you absolutely have to go, I would resign as Taoiseach rather than stand in the same room as a rapist and hand him a gift on behalf of the people. I just wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I don't think the Irish people wanted to be done either,
Yeah, and it's interesting you're saying there as well. Like Mero, I've been saying it to Mero privately now the last while. I honestly, health reasons or otherwise, right, I don't think Trump will be in power this time next year. I'm convinced of it. No. To me, the writing is on the wall. He's clearly in ill health, but whatever about that, I think right now, like, you cannot put the shit back in the horse. And they have flooded the zone with so much shit, you can't keep up with it, right? This isn't the Trump of 8 years ago. This is Trump now who is clearly cognitively impaired. And when you're talking about Steve Miller and you're talking about JD Vance, they're part of his problem because they are so sycophantic. They are so weak in their own right that even if Trump were to perish from his mortal coil tomorrow and JD Vance assumed it's still not going to see out the term. I genuinely don't believe it will because if history teaches us anything, the one that follows the emperor is usually worse and weaker and can't survive.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to see here is a situation. MAGA is eating itself alive, right? If this time last year you had sat down and said, poster children for MAGA like Marjorie Taylor Greene would be off, gone, into the sunset and bad-mouthing Donald Trump, you'd have said, no.
So is she retired now?
Yeah.
She's gone from politics.
Trying somewhat to rehabilitate her reputation, although it's never likely to happen. If all we had the brilliant Hillary McGann on the podcast around the time of the election, and we talked about that US election as being the podcast bro election, right? Look at the amount of them that are now coming out to put their hands up and be like, oh shit, okay, maybe we were wrong. But this kind of stuff. You cannot for any amount of money or any amount of bullshit and bluster undo what is being done now. And the reality that is facing the people who are around Trump is that no matter what they do, they don't have the cult of personality. So when he goes, they're fucked.
Yeah.
There's no substitute for that. There's no silver bullet for them. The reality, the cult of personality is so strong around that man. Once he's gone, it all fucking implodes. And when it does, it's going to be ugly as sin. But it's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen a lot sooner than we think.
The comment about the podcast bro stuff, I find that that just annoys the fuck out of me. Because as my dad always says about Trump's latest term, his now advisors wrote Project 2025. So everything that has happened, whether it be immigration, whether it be rollback on LGBT stuff, whether it be trying to rezone the maps, this was all in Project 2025. People were trying to tell these podcast bros before the election, this is what's being written for his next term. This is what you're advocating for. And now they're kind of going, it was so extreme that they didn't believe it. But
exactly,
now
it was dismissed as this is just conspiracy. This is leftist hysteria. This is,
But the person that wrote it is a part of his regime, and we're not calling it. Let's not call it administration. It's a regime.
I've been using the word. Yeah, I've been using the word junta to describe it because it's just a tremendously onomatopoeic word, But here's the thing, right?
That's what I hate about the likes of Rogan and stuff, where it's like, Rogan's like, oh, bro, the ice, I didn't think he was going to do that. It's like, he said he was going to do it.
Yeah.
He said he was going to do it.
But the thing, there was a historian, I can't remember his name now, lads. I'll try and dig it up so I can give it to you for the show notes, right? But a historian once wrote that don't underestimate the fact that the Germans became Nazis because they wanted to become Nazis, right? There's a huge problem in not calling things by their proper names, right? Brexit was a racist project, right? Funded to a certain extent by Peter Thiel pushing this thing and by, Murdoch's newspapers and his TV channels and his radio stations, an awful lot of Americans don't like brown people. And I remember being in, I'm not sure if I told this story before on the podcast, but I was in Manhattan when Trump was elected the first time, and I got into he was at the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, and he was up on the 5th floor in a ballroom, and I was in the bar with a friend of mine, a Swedish journalist who travelled from Los Angeles to New York in a car, and he stopped and he had a cardboard cutout of Hillary Clinton and a cardboard cutout of Donald Trump, and he just set himself up outside a diner and he'd say, would anybody like to say anything to my two cardboard cutouts here, to the two candidates here? And on the coast, everybody was really sort of, deferential about Hillary and that kind of thing, and really rude about Trump. Everywhere across middle America, he was saying he couldn't believe the things that people were saying on film, on microphone, to this fucking cardboard cutout of Hillary Clinton. And he told me then, because back then we all thought, or everybody thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. I wasn't convinced. And he said to me as we sat there in the bar about 5 o'clock, Trump staffers were coming down in the lift and they were going to the bar. They were going, well, we had a good run. Cheers. I'll see you in 4 years' time at the next election. And then Florida fell to Trump in the prognosis and they all went back up in the elevators. And your man said to me, he said, she's not going to win. There's no way she's going to win this because America just couldn't bring itself to vote for a female president, And a similar thing happened this time around, except it was worse because it was a person of colour, right? And there's so many people out there who just were not prepared to accept Barack Obama as president. And they certainly weren't prepared to expect somebody with the same skin color who was female. They're just not going to put that person in there. Now, did Joe Biden screw it up? Absolutely. Did the Democrats screw it up? Also, absolutely. But an awful lot of people saw what Trump was saying and they liked what they heard, right? And we can't discount that because an awful lot of people out there are still sticking up for the people who murdered the two people in Minneapolis. Like they're still sticking up for those guys going, no, ICE had the right to do that. You know, the guy had a gun. There's a Second Amendment. He has a right to have that firearm in that particular place, in that particular manner. In fact, it's constitutionally guaranteed that he could use it against a tyrannical government. You know, these people were the ones who always say that these rights are absolutely, you know, they're like sacred in America, and all of a sudden they're turning on themselves. So there's a huge job of work to be done there when the moment comes. And I agree with you guys, because I don't think Vance is clever enough. He's never been clever enough either. Miller is clever enough, but he's also thick. You know, he's one of these guys who thinks that the world should be the way he sees it, and that never works. You know,
but see,
I hate to give credit to Micheál Martin.
Some of the old school Republicans want Miller, and now I'm gone now, though. But that's the thing, because like, you know, because the whole way that they've done the whole ICE thing has been a disaster, right? You don't tell these guys that they have, if you're going to do it, you know, and that was the one thing that, you know, when the Nazis sort of industrialized murder to the scale that they did with Jewish people, Roma people, and LGBTQ plus people back in the Second World War, they did it quietly, right? They isolated these areas first. They took these people away secretly and quietly. Now, ICE isn't doing that, but part of the tactic for ICE is to be seen to be doing these things. They want people filming them and publishing these things and streaming them live on Facebook because they want people to be afraid, right? The Nazis didn't do that. They came in the dead of night and they took people away because they didn't want people to know that they had an industrial murder setup going on there. That's where the whole ICE thing has fallen down, and that's why an awful lot of Republicans are saying, they're not saying that what ICE is doing is wrong. They're saying the fact that people see ICE doing it, that's what's wrong, right? The same people would be more than happy to run everybody back to Ecuador and everybody back to Honduras and everybody back to Mexico if they could, as long as they don't have to look at it. And that's where Miller and Kirsty Nunn and all these people are screwed up, because that's what costs them in the ratings. You know, you're not going to lose faith in something that you haven't seen. And it's funny as well, because they're like, when the two victims were murdered in Minneapolis, and they were coming out with the whole term domestic terrorist, like, I seen a stat there the other day that 92% of detainees through ICE, 92% do not have a criminal record. 92%.
But
that is just fucking crazy. That's literally picking random people because of the colour of their skin off the street and trying to guess whether they're citizens or not.
Yeah, but Mara, when you see
there's no due course at all, like.
No, but when you see the tactic they're deploying and stuff like that, I mean, like the fact that they were more or less setting up camp in car parks over hardware stores and garden centres, because that's the type of job that, you know, immigrants tend to have, more labour intensive. And they were doing that knowing, well, on a Monday morning, they're going to go looking to get their supplies. We'll be there waiting for them, you know?
Yeah.
But the fact that here we are on the other side of the Atlantic, weeks on from the murders of Renee Good and Alex Petty, and like, it's still very much so in conversation. It's still very much so part of our, like, I can't for a second begin to imagine what the people in Minnesota are feeling and thinking and everything else off the back of it, right? And
well, amazingly, Dan, sorry to interrupt you, right? But an awful lot of the winter sports athletes from the United States of America come from Minnesota, because it's one of those places where an awful lot of people from Scandinavia settled, and they brought their sports like cross-country skiing and that with them. You know, that was just the way people got around. And Jesse Diggins, I was there today. Jesse Diggins and Kicken Randall won the first medal, Olympic cross-country skiing medal since 1976. They won a gold medal in the cross-country sprint, and it was just amazing. And Diggins is another one of those athletes. There is an announcer quitting that woman whatsoever. She's at her last Olympics now, and she posted on Facebook the other day that she represents all Americans. She represents, you know, the Americans with love in their hearts. She's like, you know, as they used to say, a uniter, not a divider, you know. And for somebody like her, and she's quite political, and she's aware of the fact that, you know, she has brands and she has sponsors, and she's walking around here sponsored by Ralph Lauren, because that's who's making the kit for the Americans. She's aware of all that, and she still feels that she has to come out and say it. Now, is she LeBron James? No. You know, is she Drake May, the quarterback of the New England Patriots? No. But she has the courage to do what Micheál Martin and many others won't, and to say that this is wrong and that there's a line in the sand here. And that to me is very important. And again, it's the power of sport that, okay, you get these people who say, oh, you know, sport and politics shouldn't be mixed. You can't separate the two. But to get back to the way people are being treated there, what is, and this is, you know, the same thing has happened with the activists for Palestine and for the environment in the UK, right? They're being taken in, locked up under terrorism legislation. What's practiced in the colonies eventually arrives at home, right? So what was being done to people in Iraq and in Kurdistan and Afghanistan since 9/11 is now being done on the streets of America, and people are shocked because now they're seeing it on their own doorstep. And you know, they liked it when it was being done to brown people, but all of a sudden when it's possible that, you know, their gardener gets picked up, or their, you know, the nurse in their local daycare centre gets picked up, all of a sudden that's a little bit difficult. And yet they're still not prepared to get off their couch and do something about it. You know, it's just an awful thing about the state of the world.
And it literally is gardeners. I've seen clips of landscapers being run off, and with the help of the people they were doing work for, they managed to escape. Like, I was watching it, I sent it to Danny and I was like, it's fucking 2026. What is going on here? Two men literally carrying out a job of landscaping, and hooded masked men getting out of a pickup truck who, as Colin Meaney was on Claire Bourne the other day, and he was saying that he's literally going to be moving away from America because of naked fascism. And he was saying this, like, people are just being picked up off the street. And he said that the ICE lads are Proud Boys. They're all Proud Boys.
Yeah.
And he was also saying as well, he just said, and what is the fascism? What is Trump obsession with trans people? 2% of less than 2% of the world's population are trans. You know, it's just fucking mad this day and age.
Again,
meanwhile, the Epstein files are out, and there's going to be no accountability. How are they? Like, Danny, I said you earlier on, where Trump is now as well suing his own Treasury Department because of him having to release his own tax files. What the fuck is going on? Like, he's become a billionaire in 12 months. He already was a billionaire, but he made $1.5 billion in 12 months. How was that helping the working class American? It's not.
It's not. I mean, I said it to you, Miro, and I think I actually said it on an episode of the podcast, and I said it's probably easy to laugh at and easy to dismiss and everything else, but like, you're dealing with a guy who has emperor mentality. He's not interested in, you know, the checks and balances of power. He's not interested in the three branches of power in the US system and how there's meant to be, you know, accountability and all that. He's not. He's setting everything up that he is an emperor. That is what that is what it's all about. And it's like, an attack on him is an attack on everything that is within his empire. That's how he views all of this. And when you break down the various different things that are happening and everything else, all he's going to do is deflect. And he set his whole unit up around him in his junta, in his regime, that they will deflect for him. You know, like, you look at, you know, the fucking the press secretary, her name Caroline Levitt. Like, I don't think a fucking word of truth has left that woman's lips in the last fucking year and a half. You know, it's the whole thing is set up around, you just lie, you double down on the lie, and you continue to do that until the people essentially just either give up, or they think it's their lying eyes and their lying ears that are fucking doing all the lying. We're telling the truth, but it's their ears and their eyes that are deceiving them.
It's essentially a cult, you know. When you see Levitt, I despise Levitt, and I want all the bad things in the world to happen to that woman, you know. But that's literally what it is. And once your brain has been so cooked by this kind of thing, right? You know, there's somebody I used to work with, and they went down the AI rabbit hole and got the whole psychosis thing and that kind of thing. And the person was eventually committed in that, you know. I will go into no details and reveal how I know them and that kind of thing. But it's essentially the same thing. That, you know, when you get involved in that kind of extremism, when you get brainwashed, or when you get radicalized, because that's essentially the word you never hear used with MAGA, which you would hear if, you know, if they were Muslims, you know, but they've been radicalized in this way. And now there's nobody around to pull the handbrake. There's nobody around to help these people out of that, you know. And it's a very empty thing. Like the whole QAnon thing, which ostensibly was about Hillary Clinton running a network of pedophiles out of a Washington pizzeria basement, right? No, there was a network of pedophiles, yeah, absolutely, but it was being run by Jeffrey Epstein, and it was being used by Donald Trump and by Andrew Mountbatten and by all these other people, you know. So you were close. But there's not a word out of any of those people now. All those people who are, do you remember Holly Holm, who beat Ronda Rousey in the UFC?
Yeah.
And I've been at press conferences with her where she's going on talking about protecting the children. You know, she always struck me as having a bit of a QAnon bent to her. I haven't seen anything on her social media about the Epstein files or protecting children since that happened, you know, because she, as the preacher's daughter was her nickname, you know, she's involved, she's up to her neck in this white Christian supremacy thing, you know. But by the same token, lads, I think the fact that the rest of the world is now coming around to seeing this for what it is, you know, I don't think it can last much longer. I do think that it is the end of, you know, we can't take America seriously as a partner anymore, you know. From the end of the Second World War until maybe, you know, the early part of this century, we could look at them as being somewhat reasonable. But I think 9/11 just cooked everybody's brain so much. And then what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq and the changes that happened in the American psyche at that point are what led us to this point. But the world has to move on without them. And if that means giving, you know, Modi in India, who's another man I don't like, or China, or any of these people, you know, we'll see how the pieces fall when that happens. But the collapse is not going to be good, and least of all for the American people.
And that's what people will say. People will say, you know, why are you giving America so much airtime to everybody? They'll say, like there was critics of Micheál Martin, or critics of people who were questioning Micheál Martin's visit to America, while also saying, I didn't hear those people complain he went to China because of China's human rights record. So, I mean, you know, I don't know.
It's the alligator closer to the boat, though, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like our entire way of living, our media system, everything we consume is westernized, right? Everything comes from
America.
the American outlook and the American viewpoint, the American dream. Look at how many Irish people fucking went to America to set up a new life over the course of the last how many centuries. You can't say that about China. You can't say that about the East. So the reality is, and I'm fucking speaking for myself when I say this. There is a massive level of ignorance about that side of the globe because we just don't have the emotional or the psychological tie to that side of the world that we have to the West. So,
yeah, but by the same token, Dan, it's one of those things that, like, you know, oh, you're complaining about this, but why didn't you complain about that, right? To me, that's, you know, it's just you're deflecting from something. Yeah, that's nonsense. And the other thing is, like, you know, Tig Hickey, the comedian on Instagram and Facebook, he keeps getting, like, Tig would have had, like, you know, he would have had not positive things to say about the Iranian regime, but he certainly wouldn't have been as annoyed with them as I am. Like, you know, and he would have said, you know, things about them. And there's always this thing about, you know, they're against the Americans and they're against Israel, that kind of thing. And I have to have credit for that. I despise that regime because it has locked up journalists that I know, including a female photographer I'm very friendly with. And I worked with the Association of Sports Journalists, the International Association of Sports Journalists, to try to have her freed. I know she was tortured in prison and now has to live in a different country. She cannot return to her home country of Iran. I despise them and everything they stand for. Right, so like if anybody's going to come to me and say, oh yeah, well you didn't complain about China, well I've actually written about things in China when I was there as well, right? So this idea that, you know, that I think they call it a purity test in America. That, oh yeah, well, did you complain about that? Yeah, okay, next thing. Yeah, next thing. Oh, you didn't complain about that one. I'm sorry, you have, you know, so your right to complain about these things is now taken off the table. Nobody has it all sussed out, right? Nobody has a complete set of fucking perfect opinions, right? For myself, for years, I gave fucking a platform to Conor McGregor and increased his fame around do I regret that? Absolutely. In fact, I went on at the very early part of his career and I complained about the fact that people weren't giving a man from a working class area fair hearing. Now, did he turn out to be a thug? Was I wrong? I was absolutely wrong. And I can own that now. But I said those things based on the information I had at the time.
And you got threatened for it.
I did, yeah. People threatened to sue me and all those kinds of things. I don't know if I'll be able to get into America for the World Cup this summer. I'm supposed to be there, but I'll probably have to go to Canada or Mexico to work on it because in my social media, anybody goes through that for more than 5 minutes, they're going to see what I think of the whole junta there, and I'm not going to get in there. So that's fine. It will actually be...
What was the relevance there of Tig Hickey in the context of Iran there? Sorry.
No, it was just that myself and Tig would differ over Iran, right? He would be much more sort of friendly towards that. Not friendly.
He collected a prize over there, did he? Or an award?
I know he's definitely been there and he's spoken on stages and that kind of thing, you know. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I know exactly what Tig thinks of it, but I'm just saying that in the context, I wouldn't have chosen to be seen in the context he was seen in with that Iranian regime, and I wouldn't have maybe said some of the things, you know. And I know he's such like a firebrand of an activist for Palestine and that, and I get that that's where it comes from, but it's not with me. It's never the case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Do you see what I'm saying? You know, I despise everybody equally, and I just think that we're the three best chaps in the world, and everybody else can go home.
That is as good a way to kind of try to put a bow on this and wrap it up as possible. Like it's as
Danny,
always, of
can I tell you one more story just
course you
before
can.
we go? And
Yeah,
let this
always.
be the one, right? So, an awful lot of what we talked about, these big things here, it's very easy for people to feel selfless, right? So,
Yeah.
I'm going to do a superhero moment, and unfortunately, I'm in the center of it, right? But when I talk about standing up, right, and when I talk about doing the things that you feel that you can safely do, where you're not a danger to yourself, I don't care if I lose opportunities over the things I said. If I did, I wouldn't say them, right? But sometimes you have to hold up your hand and you have to take a risk and you have to say stop, right? And that's how I nearly got in a fight in the duty free of Dublin Airport back in December, right? So I'm toddling through the airport and I'm thinking I'm going to get a few of these little baby whiskey, Teeling whiskey bottles. You can get a set of 3 for 20 quid or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm going to get them for my brother-in-law and for my father-in-law. We're not getting each other presents this Christmas, but I get them for them anyway. So that's grand. And I'd gone all the way through, you go through the first part where all the shops are, and then you go through the sort of the rollators all the way down to the other end where the Ryanair flights and the SAS flights do go from. So I'm in the little tax-free shop there. I said, okay, I'll get it for the lads. And I'm bending down to the corner to pick up these 2 things. And I hear the fella raising his voice with the chap behind the counter. And the next thing he starts turning to this chap's nationality and where he's from and telling him to go back there. And I'm thinking, you're the fellow who always says it on the What's the Story podcast. So you made your bed, you better lie in it, So I stood up to me full 6'3.5" basketball height and I just said one word. I says, enough. And your man starts coming, like leaves the queue and he starts coming towards me. I says, what's your problem? What's your problem? I said, I don't have a problem. And I just put up my hands like a bouncer. And I said, just don't talk to people like that, right? And he was after using the C word and everything else like that. And this is in public, lads. There's people walking to get their flights. There's people standing in the queue who are obviously intimidated or afraid of this fella, right? But if I've decided I'm going to speak my mind, then I'm going to speak it all the way in, right? And your man's coming at me and there's a bit of a smell of gargle off him. And bitterly ironically, he was speaking with an accent that wasn't native Irish himself, right? It was another, towards, east of Ireland somewhere. Like, that could be anywhere from France to wherever you're having yourself, right? And he starts trying to tell me that his destination wasn't another EU country, but he ended up saying, it's not an EU company, right? And I go, this fella's both jarred and thick, right? So what I worked out what he meant was that he was going somewhere outside the EU, but he wasn't being allowed to buy duty free because he was landing somewhere else in wherever, in Paris or somewhere beforehand. So you can't be sold tax free. And eventually, anyway, I started to walk towards him with my hands out, just going, you need to calm down. You need to calm down. And the next thing he just throws up his hand and he walked off. And I'd sort of gone off the idea of buying the whiskey at that point, but I said, I can't do it now. So I went over to the young fella at the counter and I stood there and I says, yeah, all right. And I'm paying whatever, 30 quid or 40 quid I own for these days. And he says, I'm grand. And I says, where are you from? And he had this look on his face, lads, oh, fuck, here we go again. I said, no. I said, where do you come from? And it turned out that he was from the south of Italy, near to where I gone to on my honeymoon. And I says, just finish up. I says, yeah, all right. And he says, yeah, I'm grand. Thanks very much. And he actually used the word grand, which I thought was amazing from an Italian, And the next thing I walked over, not 6 feet away from where this all happened, 2 cops were standing with machine guns, right? And I went over to the cops and I said, evening, lads. Might want to pay a bit of attention there when things are going down. And they go, oh, what? Did something happen? You probably saw what happened, but there's a fellow wandering around here now who's been shouting the C word and xenophobically abusing the chap behind the counter, Did I enjoy doing that? No, I didn't, lads, because if I had to fight that fella in duty free, I would have. And it's embarrassing for a man of my size and my advanced years to be fighting lads in there. But if I had to do it, I would have done it. And then I went and I sat down at the gate 109 it was, and I sat down there and I realised I'm looking over my shoulder here as if I was a prison officer in a pub somewhere around Mountjoy, right? I'm looking around myself going, I don't like feeling like this, thinking that somebody could come up behind me and give me a dig, right? That's the price I pay for standing up for somebody else, right? It's a very fucking low price indeed. Now, I'm in a position to do that because I'm 6'4" and I teach I've gone up a half an inch in the last couple of minutes there, 6'3.5", right? But I teach jiu-jitsu, I teach self-defense, that kind of thing. I know what I'm doing in this situation. I'm not going to say it to somebody that I know I can't take if I have to, right? But I could just as easily keep my fucking mouth shut, right? And I'm not doing it so much for the bloke who was xenophobically abusing the kid. I'm also not doing it as much for the kid behind the counter, much and all as I'm happy to be able to help him. I'm doing it for all the other people who felt that they couldn't say anything in this situation, right? And that's the only thing I can give them is, you can do this, okay? Might be a little bit dangerous and you might have to assess the risk yourself, but the time fucking comes in this life, lads, where you have to speak up and fuck the consequences simply because it's the right thing to do.
Now, Phil, our outro. Where can you listen to What's the Story podcast?
You can listen to it on Podbean. You can listen to it on Spotify. You could probably listen to it in Dublin Airport if they had more fucking balls, and they'd be playing this to absolutely everybody. All the major podcast providers, lads. You will find us on Instagram at YTS Pod overall. Still on Twitter. If you're still on Twitter, be very disappointed, lads. You'll find them on Facebook. Graham Merrigan at Merrigan Mania, pretty much over everywhere. Danny Murray, he's a little bit more of a wallflower now. Tends to stay off the social media. But tell you what, if you've enjoyed this podcast, I tend to be on a little while. So, you know, every once in a while. So subscribe, like, share it with your pals, and we get a discussion going about all the great things we can do with this world once we move the Americans offside.
Yes.
Well, it is always a pleasure, man. And I enjoyed the airport antics, and I look forward to hearing your next confrontation. I expect this to become an annual event now. Anytime.
As soon as you stop recording, I got to have one with Mero. I got to have a go at him.
Amazing. Phil, thank you.
Thanks so much, Phil. As
enjoy
always.
the biathlon.
We'll talk to you in about 3 or 4 months.
And I hope the travelling home is a lot smoother than the travelling to. But Phil, it has been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for your time as always, and enjoy the festivities of the Olympics.
I will do my best. I'm sorry if I went off on one there towards the end, but I just thought that story was too good not to share, you know.
Deadly. Absolutely brilliant. Until next time, Danny.
Here I is.
Full art.
Can I lose?